Samantha, we need to talk. My boss, Kyle Brennan, stood in my office doorway at 8:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. I'd been with Nexus Ventures for 4 years. Led the team that secured the Henderson Foundation grant. Spent 6 months developing the proposal that brought in $8.5 million in funding. Your position is being eliminated, Kyle said. Budget restructuring. Your last day is Friday. I stared at him. The Henderson grant just closed last week. I led that project. And we appreciate your contributions. But the company is moving in a different direction. He slid a severance package across my desk. 2 weeks' pay. No mention of the 6 months I'd spent building relationships with Henderson's directors, researching their priorities, crafting the perfect proposal. After he left, I pulled up my email, searching for the internal announcement about Henderson's approval. Found it. Sent yesterday while I was in a client meeting. Nexus Ventures is proud to announce securing $8.5 million in funding from the Henderson Foundation, led by our Strategic Development Director, Kyle Brennan. My name appeared nowhere. Not as team lead. Not as project manager. Not even as a contributor. Kyle had erased me completely. I closed my office door and pulled up every email related to the Henderson project. Everything was there. My analysis of Henderson's funding priorities. My outreach to their board members. My strategy for positioning Nexus as the ideal partner. 6 months of work, all documented with my name as author. Kyle had attended 3 meetings during the entire process. His biggest suggestion had been to make it sound more professional, which I'd ignored because the casual tone was exactly what Henderson preferred. Now he was taking full credit while eliminating my position. I felt cold rage building. Not explosive. Calculated. The kind that plans. I opened the Henderson funding proposal, the final version. Scanned through the sections Kyle had supposedly led. Then I saw it. Section 7. All funding recipients must maintain key personnel involved in proposal development for minimum 12 months post-approval. Henderson required staff continuity. They'd explicitly stated during negotiations that they didn't fund companies that used proposals as bait and switch. Kyle had violated the funding terms by firing me 1 week after approval. I screenshot the clause and started planning. I needed advice from someone I could trust. Someone who understood office politics and wouldn't immediately run to Kyle. Jordan Hayes worked in our legal compliance department. We'd collaborated on several projects over the years, and I'd noticed how carefully Jordan navigated company dynamics, always aware of who held power and how they wielded it. I caught Jordan at lunch, away from the office. "I heard about your position," Jordan said quietly after I explained the situation. "Sorry, but I'm not surprised." "What do you mean?" Jordan glanced around the cafe, then leaned closer. "Kyle has a pattern. He finds talented people, has them build something impressive, then pushes them out and claims the credit. You're the 3rd person I've seen him do this to in 2 years. Why hasn't anyone reported him? Because he's careful. Documents everything as team accomplishments. Makes sure HR sees his name on final deliverables. By the time people realize what's happened, they're already gone." I pulled out my phone, showed Jordan the funding clause. He missed this. Henderson requires key personnel retention. I was explicitly listed as lead developer in the application. Jordan's eyes widened. He violated the funding terms. Exactly. If Henderson finds out he fired me immediately after approval, they could revoke the grant. Samantha, be careful. Kyle is ruthless when cornered. If he thinks you're threatening his position, he'll destroy your reputation before you can expose him. I nodded slowly. This wouldn't be a quick confrontation. It would be a carefully planned campaign. That evening, I pulled up the meeting minutes from every Henderson project session. Read through them methodically, looking for discrepancies. Found them immediately. In the March 15th meeting minutes, Kyle had written, "Team discussed outreach strategy. Consensus reached on approach." But my notes from that meeting told a different story. I'd proposed the outreach strategy. Kyle had opposed it initially, saying it was too aggressive. I'd convinced him by showing data from Henderson's previous funding decisions. The minutes made it sound like a team decision. Reality was that I'd developed the strategy despite Kyle's resistance. I found 6 more instances where Kyle's meeting minutes misrepresented who contributed what. Each time, he positioned himself as the strategic leader while downplaying or erasing my specific contributions. But here's what he'd missed. I had email trails that contradicted his minutes. Messages to team members outlining my strategies. Drafts I'd sent before meetings showing I'd developed the ideas independently. Every misrepresentation in his minutes could be disproven with time-stamped documentation. I created a new folder on my encrypted personal drive. Henderson Evidence. Started organizing everything chronologically. This wasn't just about fighting back. It was about building an airtight case. The next morning, I arrived early and began systematically documenting everything. Forwarded key emails to my personal account. Downloaded proposal drafts showing my authorship. Screenshot internal documents before they could be modified or deleted. I worked quietly, methodically. Every file properly labeled. Every document cross-referenced. Building a comprehensive record of my contributions. Around 10 a.m., Kyle walked past my office. Paused at the doorway. "Everything okay, Samantha? You seem focused." I looked up, kept my expression neutral. "Just organizing files for transition. Want to make sure everything is properly documented for whoever takes over my projects." He nodded slowly, but I caught something in his expression. Suspicion. Like he sensed I was doing more than routine knowledge transfer. "Make sure to include me on any external communications during your remaining time here," he said. Protocol. Translation. He wanted to monitor what I might say to clients or partners. "Of course," I replied pleasantly. After he left, I continued documenting. But I was more careful now. Accessed files from my phone instead of my work computer. Used my personal email exclusively. Left no trace of what I was really doing. Kyle suspected something. But let him wonder. While searching through archived documents, I found something explosive. An internal memo from Kyle to our CFO dated 2 months before Henderson's approval. The memo outlined our funding strategy. But it contained a significant misrepresentation. Kyle had claimed Henderson was offering $10 million in funding. The actual approved amount was $8.5 million. A $1.5 million discrepancy. I pulled up Henderson's official approval letter. Confirmed the actual amount. Then checked our board meeting minutes from that period. Kyle had presented the inflated figure to our board. Used it to justify expanding our operations, hiring new staff, committing to projects that assumed $10 million in incoming funds. Our board had made strategic decisions based on false information. If this discrepancy came to light, it wouldn't just be about credit for the Henderson grant. It would raise questions about Kyle's competence and honesty in managing major funding relationships. I saved the memo and the approval letter. Added them to my evidence folder. Kyle had lied to our board about the funding amount. And he'd done it in writing. Friday morning, Kyle called me into his office. HR Director Patricia sat in the corner, tablet open, ready to document the conversation. "Samantha, I've learned you've been accessing confidential project files after your termination notice," Kyle began. His tone was controlled, but I heard the threat beneath it. "I've been organizing transition materials, as requested. We need to be clear about your obligations. Any external discussion of our funding relationships, our strategic partnerships, or our operational details would violate your non-disclosure agreement. Legal action would follow." I met his gaze steadily. "I understand confidentiality requirements." "Good. Because I've been made aware that you might be upset about how the Henderson project concluded. I want to ensure you understand that making false claims about your role or our processes could have serious legal consequences." He was threatening me. Trying to intimidate me into silence. But here's what he didn't know. Every legal threat he just made assumed I'd be making false claims. His threats were based on the assumption that he could prove my contributions were exaggerated. He had no idea I had documentation that proved the opposite, that his claims were the fabrications. "I appreciate the clarification," I said calmly. "I'll make sure all my communications stay within legal boundaries." After the meeting, I walked straight to a coffee shop 3 blocks away and called a lawyer. I met with Jordan that evening at a wine bar far from our office neighborhood. Needed somewhere we wouldn't run into colleagues. "Kyle threatened legal action today," I explained, "if I discuss the Henderson project externally." Jordan shook his head. "He's trying to scare you into silence. Classic intimidation. It won't work. But I need to be strategic about this. One wrong move and I look like a disgruntled employee making accusations. What's your play?" I pulled out my tablet, showed Jordan the evidence I'd compiled. The emails proving my contributions. The misrepresented meeting minutes. The funding memo showing Kyle's false claims to the board. The contract clause requiring personnel retention. Jordan studied everything carefully. "This is solid. But you need the right moment to present it. If you go to the board now, Kyle will spin it as you being vengeful about your termination. What do you suggest?" "Henderson is doing a 6-month progress review. It's standard for grants this size. If you can get your evidence to them during that review, showing that key personnel were eliminated immediately after funding approval, they'll investigate independently. That's 3 months away. Which gives you time to build your case completely. And it means you're not the accuser. Henderson is. You're just providing documentation to their legitimate review process." Thought about it. Jordan was right. The review would be the perfect opportunity. But 3 months was a long time. And Kyle would be working to solidify his narrative during that period. "One wrong move could ruin your career," Jordan warned. "You need to be patient." Over the next 2 weeks, something unexpected happened. Other employees started reaching out. First was Marcus, a data analyst who'd left 6 months ago. He sent a carefully worded LinkedIn message. "Heard about your situation. Similar thing happened to me with the Riverside project. If you ever want to compare notes." Then Alicia from marketing contacted me. She was still at the company but planning her exit. "Everyone knows what Kyle did. We've been waiting for someone to stand up to him." A third person, someone I barely knew from accounting, approached me in a coffee shop. "I have copies of budget reports that might interest you. Kyle's funding projections haven't matched reality for 2 years." I was stunned. I'd thought I was fighting this battle alone. Instead, there was a quiet network of people who'd been burned by Kyle's pattern of credit theft and manipulation. They couldn't speak publicly. Most still worked at the company or needed references. But they could provide evidence, documents, corroboration, support. I created a secure, encrypted folder where people could anonymously submit documentation. Within a week, I had evidence of 3 other projects where Kyle had claimed credit for work done by team members he'd subsequently eliminated. The pattern was undeniable. And now it was documented. I needed to understand my legal position completely, so I hired an employment attorney, Carmen Rodriguez, who specialized in intellectual property and credit attribution cases. I showed her everything. The funding proposal with my name as lead developer. The contract clause requiring personnel retention. Kyle's termination of my position 1 week after funding approval. The evidence of his pattern across multiple projects. Carmen reviewed it methodically, making notes. "This clause is powerful," she said, pointing to the personnel retention requirement. "Henderson didn't just prefer continuity. They contractually required it. By terminating you, Kyle violated the funding agreement." "Can I use that?" "Absolutely. If Henderson finds out their funding terms were violated, they have grounds to revoke the grant or demand corrective action. At minimum, they'll launch an investigation." "What about Kyle's threats of legal action if I discuss the project?" Carmen smiled. "He's bluffing. You have a legitimate grievance. You're not violating confidentiality by providing factual documentation to a funding partner conducting a legitimate review, especially when that documentation proves contract violations. So I contact Henderson directly. During their review process, yes. You present yourself as a concerned former employee with information relevant to their funding compliance. You provide documentation. You let them investigate. She pulled up the funding contract on her laptop, highlighting another section. Look at this. Section 12.3 requires Henderson to investigate any credible allegations of misrepresentation in funding applications. If you can show Kyle misrepresented who developed the proposal, Henderson is obligated to investigate. I had more than credible allegations. I had proof. When's their review? Carmen asked. 3 months. Perfect. That gives us time to prepare an airtight presentation. We'll compile everything, organize it clearly, and submit it through proper channels. Henderson will have to investigate. And when they do, Kyle's entire narrative falls apart. The backlash started subtly. I began applying for new positions, reaching out to industry contacts. Several people I'd worked with for years suddenly went silent. Emails unreturned. LinkedIn messages ignored. Then I got a call from someone I'd interviewed with. Samantha, I need to tell you something off the record. We loved your interview. But when we called Nexus for a reference, we got concerning feedback. Something about professionalism issues. My stomach dropped. Who did you speak with? Your HR department. Oh. He was sabotaging my job search. Call Jordan immediately. He's blocking my references. Of course he is. He knows you're a threat. There's something else, Jordan said quietly. HR sent me a message today, asking if I'd observed any concerning behavior from you before your termination. They're building a file. This was worse than I'd thought. Kyle wasn't just defending himself. He was actively attacking. The message came from Patricia in HR, Jordan continued. But the wording was clearly drafted by someone else. Someone creating ammunition against you. Kyle was using HR as a weapon. I needed to go on offense carefully. I requested a meeting with the Henderson Foundation's compliance officer, framing it as a project clarification discussion. The foundation was headquartered downtown. I scheduled the meeting for a Tuesday afternoon when Kyle would be at an industry conference. The compliance officer, Victoria Hayes, greeted me professionally. Ms. Chen, what aspects of the project did you want to clarify? I pulled out my carefully prepared documentation. I was the lead developer on Nexus Ventures' funding proposal. I wanted to ensure Henderson's records accurately reflect the project team, particularly in light of the personnel retention requirements in Section 7. Victoria's expression shifted immediately. Personnel retention requirements. I showed her the clause. Then I showed her my termination notice, dated 1 week after funding approval. You were terminated. You're listed as the primary developer in our files. That's correct. And I wanted to make sure Henderson was aware, given the contractual requirements. Victoria made notes. This is concerning. Section 7 is explicit about maintaining key personnel. Was there discussion of this with your employer before the termination? Not to my knowledge. I learned of the termination the week after approval. I'll need to bring this to our review committee. This may trigger an early compliance check. As I left the building, my phone buzzed. Text from Jordan. Kyle just found out about your Henderson meeting. He's panicking. Called an emergency meeting with legal and HR. Let him panic. Over the next week, I carefully leaked selected documents to strategic people. Not everything, just enough to raise questions. I sent my original proposal drafts to a former colleague who now worked at an industry publication. Didn't say anything explicitly. Just, thought you might find these interesting given recent funding announcements. The colleague was smart enough to notice my name on the documents versus Kyle's name on the public announcements. Published a brief piece noting, questions about attribution in recent high-profile funding deals. I forwarded my email correspondence with Henderson board members to a former mentor who sat on similar boards. Again, no commentary. Just, FYI, documenting my project work for future reference. The mentor responded, impressive outreach strategy. Have you received appropriate recognition for this work? Each leak was careful, deniable, but collectively, they created doubt about Kyle's narrative. He noticed. I could tell from the increasingly tense emails he sent to staff about confidentiality and proper attribution of team efforts. But he couldn't trace the leaks directly to me. I'd been too careful. Then something unexpected happened. The company newsletter featured a retrospective on recent successes. The article mentioned the Henderson Grant. And buried in the middle was a line. Special thanks to Samantha Chen for her research and development work on the initial proposal. I stared at it. Someone in communications had included my name. Probably someone who'd actually read the project files and seen my contributions. My phone exploded with messages. Former colleagues congratulating me. Industry contacts noting the recognition. Henderson Foundation staff emailing to say they'd seen the mention. But the most important message came from Kyle. My office. Now. I walked to his office calmly. Found him standing behind his desk, face flushed. What did you do? He demanded. I don't know what you mean. The newsletter. Name. I specifically told communications to keep attribution at the leadership level. I didn't write the newsletter. Maybe they accessed the project files and included accurate information. This undermines months of strategic positioning. The board thinks I led this project. Did you? Asked Inically. Lead it, I mean. Because the project files show I developed the initial proposal, conducted the research, managed the relationship with Henderson's board. Get out. His voice was tight with barely controlled rage. And understand this. If you continue to misrepresent your role in this project, there will be consequences. I left his office and immediately texted my lawyer. Document threat made. Kyle explicitly trying to suppress accurate attribution. Carmen responded. Perfect. Keep records of everything. That evening, I met with my former mentor, Dr. Patricia Vance, who'd retired from the industry 2 years ago after a successful career building nonprofit partnerships. I showed her everything. The documentation. Evidence. Kyle's pattern of behavior. She listened carefully, then leaned back in her chair. Samantha, you have a strong case. But you need to understand the game you're playing. Kyle isn't just protecting his ego. He's protecting his career. If the board discovers he misrepresented the Henderson project, it raises questions about everything else he's claimed credit for. That's the point. He should face consequences. Agreed. But you need to present this evidence to the right people at the right time. The board is composed of busy executives who don't want to dig through documents. You need to make your case undeniable and simple. How? During Henderson's review, you submit your documentation to their compliance team. Not as an accusation, but as clarification of personnel involvement. Henderson will investigate. They'll contact Nexus. They'll request records. And when they do, the board will be forced to address the discrepancies. So I let Henderson be the hammer. Exactly. You're not the disgruntled employee. You're the former team member providing accurate information to a funding partner. Sometimes the board needs only a nudge to see the truth. Let Henderson be that nudge. It was the same strategy Carmen had suggested, which meant it was probably the right approach. One more thing, Dr. Vance added. Document every interaction with Kyle from this point forward. Every threat, every manipulation attempt. When the board investigates, they'll want to know if he tried to suppress evidence. That becomes its own violation. I spent the next 2 weeks consolidating everything into a single comprehensive evidence package. Organized chronologically. Every email, every draft, every piece of proof that I'd led the Henderson project. Section 1. Initial proposal development. My emails, my research notes, my outreach to Henderson contacts. Section 2. Meetings and strategy sessions, minutes versus reality, showing Kyle's misrepresentations. Section 3. Final proposal submission, my drafts with timestamp showing my authorship. Section 4. Post-approval communications, showing my ongoing relationship with Henderson. Section 5. Termination and contract violations. 1 week after approval, violating personnel retention clause. 5 sections. 53 documents. Undeniable proof. I saved everything to an encrypted cloud drive. Made backup copies. Sent 1 set to Carmen's office for legal hold. Then I received a concerning email from our IT department. System audit requires verification of recent file access. Please confirm which project documents you've accessed in the past 30 days. I forwarded it to Carmen immediately. Her response: "Don't respond yet. This is Kyle trying to figure out what evidence you have. He's trying to preempt your claims by rewriting internal reports." That evening I got confirmation. Jordan sent a screenshot of an internal memo from Kyle to the IT director. "Please prioritize review of Henderson project files, ensuring accurate version control and attribution before external review." Kyle was trying to modify the records, change who'd created documents, alter the paper trail to support his version of events. But he was too late. I had everything already saved. And any changes he made now would be time-stamped after my termination, making them obvious evidence tampering. The betrayal came from an unexpected source. Marcus, the data analyst who'd initially reached out to support me, suddenly went quiet. Then I saw why. Kyle had offered him a promotion, senior analyst position, significant raise, starting immediately. Marcus had shared some of his evidence with me early on. Now he was deleting our message threads, removing himself from the support network. I felt the sting of betrayal, but I understood it. Marcus had a family, a mortgage, career aspirations. Kyle had bought his silence with opportunity. I wasn't angry, just disappointed. But then something interesting happened. 2 days after Marcus accepted his promotion, I received an anonymous email from a new address. "Check your shared drive folder." I couldn't stay publicly involved, but I couldn't let this drop either. I opened the folder. Found a new file Marcus had uploaded before going silent. It was an email exchange between Kyle and our CFO discussing how to manage credit attribution for the Henderson project after I'd been terminated. In the exchange, Kyle explicitly stated, "We need to ensure external partners see me as the relationship owner. Samantha's departure should be positioned as her choice to pursue other opportunities." He'd planned the narrative before even firing me, documented his intent to take credit and erase my contributions. Marcus had betrayed me publicly but left me the most damaging evidence yet. A document showing Kyle's deliberate, premeditated credit theft. I added it to my evidence package with a note. Additional documentation, March 15th. Carmen reviewed the new evidence with satisfaction. "This changes everything. Kyle's email proves intent. It's not a matter of interpretation or honest disagreement about contributions. He explicitly planned to steal credit. Is that legally significant? Very. It shows a pattern of conscious fraud rather than simple misattribution. And combined with a contract violation, terminating you despite Henderson's retention requirements, it demonstrates a complete disregard for both ethical and legal obligations." She pulled up the funding contract on her computer. "Let me show you something else. Section 9.2 deals with intellectual property rights in funded projects." I read the section. My eyes widened. Any intellectual property developed during the proposal phase belongs to the individuals who created it, not automatically to the employing organization. I read aloud. "Exactly. Which means your proposal research, your outreach strategies, your relationship development with Henderson. All of that intellectual property is legally yours, not Nexus Ventures. But I was employed when I created it." "Yes, but this particular contract has a special provision because Henderson funds individuals as much as organizations. They want to ensure researchers and developers maintain rights to their methodologies. It's unusual, but it's explicit in the contract. I thought through the implications. So Kyle didn't just steal credit. He stole intellectual property that legally belongs to me. Potentially, yes. That's a much stronger legal case than simple attribution disputes. We had him. Not just ethically. Legally. I could feel Kyle's desperation building. He started pushing for expedited funding announcements, trying to cement his narrative before I could challenge it. He scheduled a press release for the following week, arranged interviews with industry publications, planned a company celebration highlighting his successful funding leadership. But I'd been studying the company handbook, found something Kyle had overlooked in his rush. Our board required formal approval for any press releases involving funding partnerships over $5 million. The Henderson grant was $8.5 million. Kyle's planned press release needed board approval, which he hadn't secured yet. I sent an anonymous tip to our board secretary. Heads up, planned Henderson press release may not have proper board approval per policy 7.3. 2 hours later, Kyle's press release was pulled pending board review. I watched from my temporary office as he realized what had happened. Saw him frantically making calls. Heard his raised voice through the closed door of the conference room. The board review meant delay, which meant time for Henderson's compliance investigation to complete, which meant Kyle's window to control the narrative was closing. He knew it. I knew it. And now he knew that I was actively blocking his moves. Henderson's review was scheduled for exactly 6 weeks out. I had the evidence package ready. Carmen had prepared the submission letter. Dr. Vance had reviewed my strategy and confirmed it was sound. Now it was about timing. Submitting too early would give Kyle time to maneuver. Too late and he might successfully establish his false narrative. I decided on 2 weeks before the review. That would give Henderson time to investigate but not give Kyle time to effectively counter. Meanwhile, Kyle was visibly anxious. I saw him in the office sometimes. I'd been kept on for knowledge transfer that neither of us wanted but the company required. He looked exhausted, stressed, constantly on his phone. I overheard him once telling someone, "It's handled. I just need to get through the next few weeks." He sensed something was coming but didn't know what. Didn't know how much evidence I had. Didn't know about my legal counsel or my strategic advisors or my carefully prepared documentation. He just knew I hadn't gone quietly. And that terrified him. One afternoon, I saw him reviewing files in the conference room. The Henderson project folders spread across the table. He was trying to prepare for questions he didn't yet know would be asked. Too late. I'd already submitted my documentation to Henderson's compliance team that morning. The board review began on a Wednesday morning. I wasn't there. I'd left the company 2 weeks prior. But Jordan texted me updates. Board members just arrived. Kyle looks nervous. Henderson compliance officer is here too. Questions started. Someone just asked Kyle to explain the personnel retention clause. Kyle claiming your departure was voluntary. Board asking for documentation. Henderson officer just presented evidence of contract violation. Board looks shocked. I sat in a coffee shop 3 blocks from the office waiting. My phone kept buzzing with updates from Jordan and others in the building. The meeting went on for 3 hours. Far longer than a normal funding review. Finally Jordan called. "Samantha, you need to hear this." The board asked Kyle directly. "Did you develop the Henderson proposal or did Samantha Chen?" He tried to say it was collaborative. Then the compliance officer showed your emails. The drafts with your name. The meeting notes. The timeline showing you did the work while Kyle attended 3 meetings. What did he say? He stammered. Tried to claim you'd been mentored by him. The board wasn't buying it. Then someone asked about the CFO email. The one where Kyle planned to take credit before firing you. He went pale. Claimed it was taken out of context. Did they believe him? No. The board chairwoman asked Henderson's compliance officer directly. In your assessment, Did Mr. Brennan violate the funding agreement's personnel retention requirements? The officer said yes. Unequivocally. The board had seen through Kyle's lies. Finally, the board called an emergency executive session that afternoon. Kyle was excluded. Jordan managed to get me a summary through a friendly board assistant. Board reviewed all evidence. Henderson's compliance officer confirmed contract violations. Your documentation proved your role. Board is discussing consequences for Kyle and remediation for you. The evidence was undeniable. Emails showing my proposal development. Drafts with my authorship. Meeting notes proving my strategy. The timeline demonstrating Kyle's minimal involvement. And most damaging, his own email planning to steal credit before even firing me. The board couldn't ignore it. Henderson couldn't ignore it. The facts were too clear. At 4:47 p.m., the board released a statement. Following a comprehensive review of the Henderson Foundation funding project, the board has identified significant discrepancies in attribution and compliance. Corrective measures are being implemented. 20 minutes later, Kyle's LinkedIn status changed to open to opportunities. He'd been forced to resign. The official announcement came Thursday morning. The board released a detailed statement acknowledging my role in securing the Henderson grant, apologizing for the misattribution, and confirming Kyle Brennan's departure. Henderson Foundation issued their own statement. We have completed a compliance review of Nexus Ventures funded project. We are satisfied that corrective measures have been taken regarding personnel and attribution. We look forward to continued partnership. My phone exploded with messages. Former colleagues congratulating me. Industry contacts expressing support. Job offers from 3 different organizations who'd been following the story. Kyle attempted one final move. He released his own statement claiming he'd been unfairly scapegoated for normal management decisions, and that I had been a valued team member but not the sole contributor. Carmen responded immediately with a cease and desist letter. The statement was removed within hours. Kyle's attempt to salvage his reputation only made him look worse. The evidence was public now. Everyone could see he'd lied. His career wasn't just damaged. It was over. 2 weeks later I had 5 job offers. 3 from companies I'd applied to previously. The ones Kyle had sabotaged with false references. They'd all called back after the truth emerged, apologizing and asking if I was still interested. 2 were from organizations I'd never contacted. They'd followed the story and wanted someone with my combination of skills and integrity. I accepted a position as Director of Strategic Partnerships at a foundation larger than Henderson. Better pay, better title, better reputation. My first week there, I received an email from Kyle. The subject line read, "Can we talk?" The message was carefully worded. He expressed regret for misunderstandings and suggested we move past this situation professionally. He hinted at his difficulty finding new employment and wondered if I might be willing to reconsider the characterization of events. I forwarded it to Carmen without responding. Her reply was brief. He's desperate. His reputation is destroyed, and no one will hire him. Don't engage. I didn't. Kyle had made his choices. Now he lived with the consequences. Meanwhile, my career was thriving. The foundation valued my expertise. My colleagues respected my contributions. My name appeared on every project I worked on. Everything Kyle had tried to take from me, I'd reclaimed. And I'd done it by being smarter, more thorough, and more strategic than he'd ever imagined possible. 6 months after the board review, I was invited to speak at an industry conference about ethics in fundraising and credit attribution. I told my story, not as revenge, but as a cautionary tale, about the importance of documentation, the value of building authentic relationships rather than claiming credit for others' work, the power of patience and strategy over emotional reactions. When someone steals your work, I told the audience, you have 2 choices: react emotionally and lose credibility, or respond strategically and win the long game. I chose strategy. After the talk, several young professionals approached me. They'd experienced similar situations. Bosses taking credit, contributions ignored, work stolen. "What should I do?" one woman asked, frustrated tears in her eyes. "Document everything. Build your evidence quietly. Find your allies. And remember, competence and integrity always win. Not immediately, not easily, but eventually truth prevails." I thought about Kyle sometimes. Wondered if he'd found work. Hoped he'd learned something from the experience, though I doubted it. But mostly I focused forward. My career had survived his betrayal and emerged stronger. I'd proven to myself that I could fight back strategically and win. And I'd learned something invaluable. Your work speaks for itself, but sometimes you need to make sure the right people are listening. That's the real victory. Not revenge. Not even justice. But the knowledge that when someone tries to erase you, you have the power to write yourself back into the story. And this time, no one could erase my name from anything I'd built.